Hello everyone, my name is Kit Colbert and I'm CTO for Cloud Platform at VMware. And today we're going to talk about migrating and modernizing your applications using VMware Cloud on AWS. So let's dive right into it. You know, it's not a surprise to anyone that modern businesses require modern applications. The scale of demand is growing, the agility, the need to move really quickly and to adjust rapidly to changing business situations. As we talk to customers on this journey toward modernizing their applications, what we found is that these applications need to be run in all different sorts of locations, that the infrastructure requirements for these applications are actually pretty diverse. They may need to run on-prem, in the data center, in the public cloud, or sometimes at the edge to be near IoT devices and all those IoT devices' data. And obviously when customers are looking at this and trying to think through how they're going to do it, they run into a lot of challenges. And you can imagine if you do have this very diverse environment, very diverse set of infrastructures, that there's a lot of challenges there around tooling, around skill set, around common technologies and common operational processes, trying to ensure specific SLAs. And so what we find is that this actually really impacts customers' goals toward that application modernization effort. Things around decreased agility, increased risk, and in the end, higher costs. So these are really big problems that we hear about when we talk to customers. So this is why VMware and AWS came together. Obviously, VMware, the leader in the on-prem data center space, AWS, the leader in the public cloud space. And we came together to produce a joint solution that we're talking about today. And that was about 4 years ago or so when we first kicked off this effort. But what's been great about it is that we're actually continuing to deepen that partnership. And that now, VMware Cloud and AWS is really the premier offering for both VMware and AWS. And that this offering is what AWS will direct its customers toward. And similarly speaking, when we as VMware talk to our customers, we're directing them toward the AWS Cloud as well. So really, really powerful stuff here. So what exactly is VMware Cloud and AWS? Well, let's jump into it. So what this is a jointly engineered cloud service. It delivers the VMware software-defined data center capabilities within the AWS cloud. The goal here is to make this as true a cloud service as possible. On-demand, dynamic, as-you-go consumption, super simple to use. It's also consistent. The same software, vSphere software that you're running on premises, we now have in the public cloud. That means you get amazing portability of applications. You can move them from on-prem to the cloud or back and forth. And finally, we enable not just migration of applications, but actually modernization of applications. As you modernize the infrastructure, it makes it dramatically simpler to modernize those applications, bringing in newer technologies like Kubernetes and containers, and all the great services and capabilities that AWS offers. So looking into a little more detail here, what we're talking about specifically is, again, VMware's software-defined data center, SDDC technologies, core compute, storage, and network, our vSphere, vSAN, NSX capabilities, running within the AWS data center. This is actually running on bare metal. So again, it's not some sort of nested solution. In fact, VMware and AWS worked really closely together to deliver and create this bare metal EC2 service so that we can have vSphere and the rest of the SDDC components running at top speed, fully secure, and multi-tenant isolated environment within the AWS data center. And once we provision that, you then have the easy ability to manage consistently across your on-prem environment and your cloud environment. You get all the great ecosystem capabilities that VMware has. We have tens of thousands of different ecosystem partners. All those tools just work on top of VMware Cloud on AWS, just like they do on your on-prem data center. The same teams can manage both these environments using the same skill sets that they already know. So it's a really, really powerful solution. And not only that, as we mentioned, we now are running inside the AWS data center these unmodified vSphere-based applications. They now have direct, high bandwidth, low latency access to all the great AWS services that are out there, making it super easy to take advantage of all the innovation that AWS is driving to help modernize applications in your environment. And so if we look at this, it is, as I mentioned, a cloud service. Now, this is something a little bit different for VMware, right? Traditionally, VMware sold customers software that they would run in their data centers and operate themselves. What we're doing here is something very different because VMware is actually operating the VMware software now. That means the customers no longer have to figure out, which versions go with what, managing lifecycle management, doing upgrades and that sort of stuff, dealing with components that go down, vCenter fails in the middle of the night. It's VMware engineers that are waking up and going to fix that stuff. And so we developed a really sophisticated set of capabilities there, built out all sorts of tooling and automation, even built up whole new teams to support this new environment. So as you can see here on the screen, things like our service operations, our site reliability engineering, enhanced security operations center there, looking for any potential vulnerabilities. We've combined that with all the support mechanisms, making the experience for customers as seamless as possible. It's a really, really powerful concept here because before, it was a whole effort for a customer to get a vSphere environment. They had to do all this setup and configure hardware and install software. But now, it's just an API call. Right? That's the real power of this approach. And so it dramatically simplifies things. And what that allows is for our customers to focus more on what differentiates them as a business. Something I actually say to customers a lot, which maybe sounds odd at first, but it's that no customer has ever differentiated themselves by how well they run VMware software. Right? It's just something you had to do. I mean, you can negatively differentiate yourself by how poorly you ran our software, but this was all table stakes. And that what really differentiated a business to their customers were really, of course, that business's applications and how they engage with their own customers. And so the idea here is let VMware take care of all the basics of VMware software and allow our customers to go focus on what really differentiates them as a business. It's a really basic concept, but at the same time, a really, really powerful one. And so on that note, we want to make everything as simple as possible here. The packaging, the consumption model, and so forth. I've talked already about all the great capabilities we bring in terms of lifecycle management, in terms of support. Again, plugging into that global support operation, making things as easy as possible for customers using this. Getting all the different vSphere software, SCDC software, all bundled together, easy to consume on the AWS bare metal infrastructure. And you get a lot of options in terms of how you want to consume that. It's all one price, one package. It's basically on a per physical host basis. And you can do that in a number of different ways. You can buy it from VMware, from AWS, from some of our partners. You can use a credit card. You can pay with credits. You can also get an on-demand model or buy a 1 or 3 year reserved instance. And in those cases, obviously, 1 or 3 years, you get a big discount, right, for committing to that longer term. So all the same cloud options you now have with VMware Cloud and AWS for the VMware SCDC capabilities. And as I mentioned, this is taking advantage of AWS's global footprint. We've worked very closely with AWS to bring the VMware Cloud and AWS service to all the different regions that AWS has all over the world. So wherever you're based, or if your company is a global company, well, you can get it where you need it and where your applications need to run. And not only that, we've also done a lot of work in terms of compliance and other sorts of certification standards to ensure that we can run all of your most mission-critical applications with potentially very sensitive data. But we're not stopping there, right? That was just the beginning. We're continuing to evolve the service and to continually improve the service. So one of the big new announcements we have is a new host type. So just like EC2, we've got instance types. We started out with an i3, and now we have something called i3EN. And as you can see here, this i3EN is much, much beefier in terms of resource capabilities than the i3. What we heard from customers again and again was that they had a lot of storage capacity-bound workloads, things like Oracle or SQL Server, these mission-critical workloads that they wanted to move to VMware Cloud and AWS. They loved the i3 because it had a simple HCI type of architecture, made it really easy to scale up. But the problem was that there just wasn't enough storage to support these bigger workloads. So that's exactly why we introduced i3EN. And so you can actually see here all the detailed hardware configuration capabilities there. I mean, i3 is already a pretty beefy server, right? 36 cores, half a terabyte of RAM, 11 terabytes of disk. But again, as you can see with i3EN, we substantially increase those numbers, especially on the storage side. So about 4 times as much storage with i3EN as with i3. And so that's been very, very exciting for customers now that we've released that. It's enabled them to have more flexibility in terms of how they scale and to bring those true mission-critical workloads into VMware Cloud on AWS. But in addition to going big, we're also going small. So we're supporting smaller form factor footprints for some customers to get started with the service. So historically, actually when we first started, we required you to have a minimum of 4 hosts in any given cluster, in any given software-defined data center. We eventually relaxed that and went down to 3, but some customers said, you know what, I've only got, let's say, 30 or 40 VMs. I don't need 3 big hosts. I actually would prefer 2. And still getting all the great SDDC capabilities, things like high availability, vMotion, DRS, and so forth. So we answer that call. We now have support for 2 nodes. Again, a lower price point, and we think will be very useful for a lot of customers who are just getting started with the service and want to try it out and prove it out with an initial set of their applications. In addition, we're working really closely with partners. And so our service provider partners are a really big aspect of our business. Work really closely with them. And so we developed software called VMware Cloud Director. What VMware Cloud Director does is essentially provide a multi-tenancy layer, kind of like EC2 or some of the AWS services, that sits on top of the software-defined data center and allows a provider to carve that up for multiple users, multiple tenants, in a very secure way. And what we're doing is enabling that on top of VMware Cloud and AWS. This means that for a service provider, they can actually carve up a software-defined data center into potentially very small pieces and hand that out to different tenants or customers of their own, while again ensuring clean isolation, separation, high security, multi-tenancy, all these great capabilities. So that's also available now as well. So 2 exciting things that again give our customers more options in terms of how they consume this service. Okay, so that's the basics on VMware Cloud and AWS. So now let's talk about the use cases. Why would someone use this service? What are we hearing from customers? So as you can see on the screen, there's 4 main use cases here. I'll start from left to right. Talk about disaster recovery. Now this is a really big one. And as you probably know, traditionally how customers would do this was that they'd have a physical data center, that would be their primary data center, and they'd build out a physical secondary or backup data center that would be their DR site in case something happened to that first one. Sometimes it'd be active-passive, sometimes it'd be active-active. They have different sorts of things. But the cloud offers a really unique opportunity here. Why is it that a customer is building this whole other data center that oftentimes doesn't get used that much, and it's just there in case of this DR event, when they could use the cloud instead? Use all those great cloud agility, dynamic capabilities of spinning up a bunch of hosts on the fly, on demand, when's needed. So the idea here is because of the fact that VMware Cloud and AWS provides that great infrastructure and operational consistency, the ability to move workloads back and forth without any modification, well, hey, let's get rid of that backup DR site and move to a pure cloud model. And so we're seeing a lot of customers doing that because it saves them a ton of money, right? You don't need this whole physical data center that you're not using that much. So again, great use case, a lot of interest there. The next one we'll talk about is data center extension. Now this is one where a customer has a physical data center and they want to keep that, but they want to use cloud capacity in some way to augment that on-premises physical location. And we see all sorts of different use cases. Some customers, like Playtika here, they want to keep their production on-prem, but move test dev, which is oftentimes very bursty, up into the cloud. Other customers may want to do test dev on-prem, but move production to the cloud. We see other customers who want to do everything on-prem, but just have this bursting capability to very quickly get more resources in the cloud when they do run out of capacity in their data center. And what this allows them to do is to actually build their data centers more for average usage rather than focusing on peak usage, which of course means there's a lot of waste because peak isn't hit that often, right? So that's another common use case we see is data center extension. Now, data center evacuation or cloud migrations is the third one. And this is actually probably the most common use case, I would say, from talking to customers. And this one, it's customers just want to get out of the data center business altogether, right? They say, hey, this doesn't differentiate me. I don't need to do this. I don't want to deal with it. I want someone else to take care of all these issues. And so there, VMware Cloud and AWS has been huge for many, many customers. IHS Markit, which we'll talk about more in just a minute. We see customers moving workloads very, very quickly, much more quickly than they thought they might be able to, and are able to evacuate those data centers and get them, either sell them or get them off lease. And then finally, we have next generation applications. And I mentioned this before, this notion of migrating and then modernizing. And we do see a lot of customers doing this. Oftentimes they might try to modernize on-prem, but without a modern infrastructure, it can be much more difficult to build modern applications. And so by moving to VMware Cloud and AWS, they suddenly get all these great infrastructure capabilities, these cloud capabilities, the dynamic scaling, the new sorts of Kubernetes and container-based capabilities. This allows them to very quickly migrate and then in their own time to modernize using these newer technologies, these newer capabilities. So these are the 4 use cases that we see primarily. Now let's talk a bit more about some specific customers and their journeys with VMware Cloud and AWS. So the first one is IHS Markit. Now this has been a long time VMware Cloud and AWS customer, an early adopter. They're in the financial services space. And they had this acquisition that they were doing, and they needed to very quickly move all that acquisition's workloads into the cloud. And so as you can see, they were able to do that and move about 1,000 workloads in only 6 weeks, right? Just spectacularly quick. Kind of unheard of. They had not expected this at all. They weren't thinking about it. They had planned out a multi-month or even year-long type of migration. Because normally when you move to a native cloud environment, there is some retooling, maybe some refactoring of the applications that's needed. That can take a little while. But here we're seeing much, much faster migrations. And so, IHS did that, and they're doing a bunch of other stuff with us now as well, and actually taking advantage of i3EN as well. So a great use case here about the speed and agility that you can get from VMware Cloud on AWS. Another one, let's talk about education, the school district here. So these are folks who are really looking to save on hardware costs, on all the different physical infrastructure management and operations. They just didn't want to deal with it, right? They're an education institution. It's not something that really differentiates them. They need to focus on their students and on their curriculum. And so by moving to VMware Cloud, they're able to do this. But not only that, they set themselves up really well to be able to react when COVID-19 happened. They're able to move a lot of their educators, or all of their educators and administrators actually, remote, right? And spin up either remote desktops or remote working environments for those administrators using VMware Cloud and AWS. And again, it's a testament to the power of the AWS cloud and the underlying dynamics there that they were able to do that, right? Spin up many, many new hosts on the fly, get those workloads spun up, and be able to get those educators and administrators working again safely from home. Insurance. Now this is a great example of a disaster recovery customer. Again, someone that didn't want to deal with it, didn't want to have to manage a physical DR site, didn't really want to have to manage a DR solution themselves. And so one of the great things here is that not only is the underlying infrastructure delivered as a service, but the actual DR solution is as well. And so we see some really great cost savings there for them on that front. Now, we talk about cost savings, and actually we'll talk a whole bunch more about cost savings because it is a really important consideration. But as I mentioned, if you go back to that slide from a few slides ago around the use cases, cost savings are not what brings people into VMware Cloud and AWS. It's one of these other ones, right? I'm a CFO, or my CFO says, hey, we got to get out of the data center business. Or my CIO or CEO are demanding that we go to cloud. And a lot of customers were trying to figure out, how do I do this? And what they realized was that VMware Cloud and AWS was the fastest and easiest way to do that, could very quickly help them meet their business goals. But it turns out, hey, you can actually save some money too. And that's really, really powerful. And that's what these folks at Pennsylvania Lumbermen's Mutual Insurance found as well. But this is just a small sampling, right? We have many, many customers across basically every industry, every vertical, every segment. A small sampling you can see here on the screen. And it's not just customers. We've also built out a ton of partners. Now, we call these solution partners because these folks are focused on helping customers be successful at adopting and embracing VMware Cloud and AWS. And so again, we've got worldwide coverage. Anywhere that your business is running or where you need workloads or applications stood up, us and together with these partners can help. But it goes further than that. As I mentioned before, VMware has a huge ecosystem, as does AWS. And so by coming together, we can actually bring the power of our ecosystems together as well. So there's a ton of capabilities, as you can see here, around migration and management and monitoring, security, DevOps, the list goes on, about how you really fully operationalize and run production applications on top of VMware Cloud and AWS. And so what we've done is, between us and AWS, we work really closely with our ecosystems to bring all these great capabilities there and to specifically certify them for those environments as well. So that's a really powerful thing. Again, both of us have huge ecosystems, and now we're really honing down, focusing on those partners and making sure they work really well with the VMware Cloud and AWS offering. In the end, though, this whole thing is about business outcomes, right? And hopefully, through the last few slides, you've heard about some of those business outcomes we've been talking about. This notion of accelerating innovation, of moving faster, of giving customers more choice and optionality. We're tying this back to business outcomes, because that's what it's all about, and that's what everything that we're doing is about, and that's what we hear our customers asking for. And oftentimes we see that technology can be an inhibitor toward those business outcomes. And so the real powerful thing about VMware Cloud and AWS is that we get technology out of the way. We allow you to achieve the business outcomes that you need as quickly as possible. And we do that in a number of different ways. I've talked about them. And probably one of the biggest ones is getting rid of stuff that doesn't differentiate you, right? You as a business shouldn't be doing that. You should focus on what really differentiates you with your customers. Leave all the undifferentiated heavy lifting to us, to AWS, and to all those partners that we just talked about. So that's that uplifting of operations, really, really simplifying a lot of things there. And finally, the cost aspect as well. And this is something that's really surprising, I think. As I mentioned, people don't come into it looking for necessarily a cheaper cost, but it actually is cheaper to use VMware Cloud and AWS compared to on-prem data centers, compared to going to native cloud otherwise. And this, again, is pretty shocking. So for the next section, I'd like to talk about costs and, in fact, cloud economics. Because, as we've talked to more and more customers, this question kept coming up. People just didn't believe it or didn't know how to think about it. So now we have a whole team focused on the economics of the VMware Cloud and AWS offering. As a matter of fact, that team has been hard at work for the past couple of years doing all sorts of research. We've collected a lot of data from customers that have been running on VMware Cloud and on AWS so far. And what we found are some pretty spectacular results. So, again, you can see some of the sources down there at the bottom. Feel free to Google those, learn more. I'll add some links here at the end that you can dive into. But at a high level, what we found is that you can get up to 60% savings with VMware Cloud and AWS over a traditional on-prem vSphere deployment. And again, that's pretty astounding. But we really crunched the numbers, looked over a 3-year period, just used 3,000 VMs as a kind of metric there. But what we did was calculate all the different factors. So we took into consideration software costs, hardware costs, data center costs, power, cooling, operational costs, people costs, all that sort of stuff. And what we find is that there's a lot of different issues, right? Customers are building data centers too big, they're building for peak, they haven't done enough automation, so they're doing a lot of manual type of activities, and that's, of course, increasing cost. The great thing about VMware Cloud and AWS is that it's a fully automated solution, that we do have site reliability engineers and our product engineers working on the product, but they only jump in when they need to, right? And so that can actually save a lot of money and drive a lot of simplicity, and so that's a big factor in that reduced cost there. Also, in terms of migrations, again, obviously much, much faster, as you've seen, like moving 1,000 workloads in 6 weeks. We've seen some customers move hundreds of workloads in just 3 weeks, right? Getting started very, very quickly. And so, before these customers were planning on, okay, maybe it's multiple months, maybe it's even years, getting down now to that migration taking, just a month or a few weeks even, or sometimes even on the order of days we've seen. So much, much faster. And, a lot of the reason for that is it's not just, pixie dust and magic, right? It's actually real things. This is faster because it's fundamentally simpler and easier. The applications don't need to be changed. Same app that runs on-prem can now run in the cloud. That's because of the power of the underlying infrastructure. It's consistent infrastructure. There's no refactoring. There's no retooling. The same tools now work in both places. And so we give customers that simplicity, that flexibility, the optionality, and thus they get all the efficiency that we just talked about there. So again, there's a ton of information here. We'll have some links at the end that you can go check out. But it's a really, really powerful aspect that not only do you get all these other benefits that we've been talking about thus far, but you can actually do it more economically as well. Okay, so thus far we've been talking a lot about migration and all the great benefits of moving to VMware Cloud and AWS. But once you get there, then you can really start thinking about how to take the next step, how to modernize. And again, as I talked about, modern infrastructure makes it much easier to modernize those applications. And so when we talk about modern infrastructure, we talk a lot about, and modern applications, I should say, we talk a lot about automating the underlying infrastructure, automate as much as you can, as I just talked about. Then you can transform the applications. And then finally, enrich or enhance or extend the applications with a bunch of the great AWS services functionality. So let's talk through each of these. So on the automation side, this has been a huge focus area for us. VMware Cloud and AWS is very API-centric. Obviously, there is a UI that you can use, and that's what a lot of our demos look like. But there's an API there, and we've integrated it with all sorts of capabilities. You can see there on the right. We built a lot of tooling for it and information sites for it that you can see here as well. And in terms of the integrations, we do Power CLI, PowerShell, a huge fan favorite amongst our vSphere user base. But we've also expanded and extended vRealize automation with an integration into it, and Terraform, and finally CloudFormation as well. So a lot of different options here in terms of how you want to automate. But the point is that all the basic primitives are there for you to take advantage of. So in addition to automating the underlying infrastructure, you can then start modernizing the applications. And so we just recently announced integration with Tanzu Kubernetes Grid Plus. What this enables you to do is to very easily spin up Kubernetes clusters on top of VMware Cloud and AWS. It really simplifies managing those clusters, securing them, and getting your applications deployed and modernized on top of that infrastructure. But as I talked about, the real opportunity here is now that those workloads, those vSphere workloads, are running inside of AWS's data centers, you can get high bandwidth, low latency access to all the great AWS services. And I'm sure you're familiar with all of them, but across storage, right? We see a lot of interest in S3, different file system options to start building on top of with your applications. Databases, things like Redshift, RDS, Aurora, very, very popular with our user base. And then, of course, all the cool newer stuff, things like Lambda and serverless capabilities, all the different AI and machine learning technologies that AWS has. It's insane, right? SageMaker just being one of them. And then IoT, right? If you need to start managing IoT devices, the AWS IoT Core, really, really powerful set of capabilities. And this is just a small sampling of what's there to start enhancing your applications. A great example of this would be Stagecoach. Again, another long-time VMware Cloud and AWS customer, moved very quickly onto VMware Cloud and AWS, and then has started to modernize their applications, really taking advantage of all the things that we just talked about, getting deployment times down, and just in general, driving a lot of the agility and the cloud-native benefits that they were looking for. So great success story there. So let's talk really quickly about VMware Cloud and AWS Outposts. Same basic idea here. AWS Outpost is going on-prem, as we mentioned, and we can also run VMware Cloud on top of it, right? Same underlying AWS infrastructure, same VMware Cloud and AWS. So this can run right next to your existing data center vSphere instances, right? You can move workloads back and forth if you want to take advantage of those different AWS services. So a really, really powerful set of capabilities that your users, developers can take advantage of in addition to moving your applications onto that infrastructure. This is in beta right now, so if you're interested, you should scan the QR code and sign up for it. Again, really, really cool stuff. Highly recommend that you check it out. And again, a great hybrid story. On-prem, cloud, vice versa. That's really what we're going towards here. Now, one other really interesting one. Thus far we've been talking about this notion of VMware running on AWS, but here we're actually talking about AWS running on VMware. And so we announced this partnership a year or two back around partnering around RDS and this ability to run RDS on top of your VMware instances. So this is a really, really powerful capability. It gives you more flexibility and optionality as you're starting to take advantage of these AWS services. You can now use RDS wherever VMware runs, right? Not just VMware Cloud and AWS, but even your normal vSphere environment, VMware Cloud Foundation environment, in the data center at the edge, and so forth, right? So again, really, really powerful set of capabilities. So hopefully you're interested and want to learn more. If so, we've got a lot of different ways to do that. I talked about the cloud economics piece. There's a link there in the middle to go check out more. Again, there's a whole bunch of analysis that you can do. We can connect with you and get you all the data and information that you need. You can also try this service hands-on. We have these hands-on lab technologies. It's been a great way for all of our customers to experience many of our different products. VMware Cloud and AWS is no different. So there's a link, and please go check it out. But you can also get started right now with VMware Cloud and AWS. There's no need just to try the hands-on lab. You can actually go do the real thing. You can just takes a credit card, as we talked about. You can get a 2-node setup going, and you're off and running with it. So look, in the end, there's tons of different resources here, all sorts of different white papers and websites and videos, everything you might want. So take a screen grab of this and go and learn more. So VMware Cloud and AWS, as you've seen today, is a powerful, jointly engineered solution by VMware and AWS. And the goal here is actually to be the fastest and simplest path for your application migration to the cloud and subsequent application modernization. Please check it out today. Thank you so much.